Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Open University.
Welcome friends. On behalf of the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Open University, Ahmedabad, I welcome you to this video lecture. Today we'll be talking about Unit 1, Part 4 of this MAJMC, Master of Arts in Journalism and Mass Communication course, and this is on paper 8, Types of Professional News Writing, and we are discussing about news reporting in Unit 1. We have spoken about different things in subjectivity, objectivity, about the need for being up to date with digital literacy and all those things. And in this context, it's very, very important to understand this kind of a paradox that we see in modern reporting. So, modern journalism faces a very important paradox. And what is that paradox? And I have already discussed about that in the third unit of, in the third part of Unit 1 that I discussed in the earlier video, which was about balancing the traditional ideas of objective reporting with the challenges posed by misinformation and biased narratives from authoritative figures. These narratives could be from people who are known, people whose or whose credibility is well established, but even they can fall prey to the challenges of misinformation. And that is where, when you are actually doing objective reporting, when you are just clearly putting out somebody's speech, and that is a very important challenge. Because you quote somebody's speech, and if that person has not done the due diligence or is kind of deliberately trying to mislead, that can be a major problem. So, at one end is the requirement for objectivity, at the other end there are these challenges posed by misinformation and biased narratives. The second is that the journalists have to navigate these complexities, because they have to maintain objectivity and factual accuracy, where often authorities may promote false narratives. So, it calls for journalists to engage in critical analysis and thorough fact checking to counter misinformation and to uphold journalistic integrity. Very, very important to understand this critique of objectivity in journalism. So, we have discussed how objectivity is important. We have discussed the elements of objectivity. We said that objectivity is about accuracy, it is about neutrality, it is about impartiality, it's about being fair, and it's about presenting both sides of the story. Now, that's fine, that's good as far as its ideas are considered, or as far as its philosophy is considered, but there are certain practical challenges. And those challenges are that this strict adherence to objectivity may lead to passive reporting, where journalists become mere conveyors of information rather than active analyzers and explainers of news. And that's a very important distinction, that whether journalists should be seen as just disseminators of information, where your job is just to report what somebody is saying, or whether you should actively take part in promoting what is right, or in leading some kind of a change that is required. So, do you want journalists to be just conveyors of information, or do you want them to be active analyzers or explainers? Because that explanation of news is also very important. And when you are explaining news, you have to kind of put in not exactly a subjective interpretation, but there will be an interpretation, and that interpretation could be about the background, that this particular event or this particular happening has this background. It is about significance, it is about a context as well. So, strict adherence to objectivity may lead to passive reporting, where journalists become mere conveyors of information. So, we have to rethink objectivity to be less restrictive and more reflective of the complex reality, which has to enable journalists to provide deeper insights and contextual understanding of news events. So, it is about the context. It is not just about information itself, but as we have said in our earlier units, it's about the meaning of the information, and that's where a line has to be drawn where, okay, plain objectivity will not help. At times the meaning of the information is required, and when we talk of those meaning, we'll have to provide an interpretation, and those interpretations are in these three elements: what is the background, what is the significance, and what is the context. Objectivity has also been kind of compared with lazy reporting, for example. Often journalists are accused of being lazy reporters, that okay, you just give 2 points of view and you leave it for readers or viewers or others to talk about it. So, probably that is not the right way to go about journalism. That's a lazy way of reporting it, because you do not see the actual significance, you do not see the actual context, you do not even talk about the actual background. So, at times objective reporting or just strict adherence to the letter of the objective reporting, where you just are impartial, etc., you are not doing true reporting, because you are not providing the true context or the true significance of those reports. So, the criticism here is that an overemphasis on objectivity can excuse superficial reporting, where providing both sides of the story is deemed sufficient, because providing both sides of the story often does not capture the full complexity or the full truth. So, it is important to go beyond, or to at least understand that this critique exists, and we have to at times go beyond superficial reporting, where providing both sides of this is not sufficient. You have to capture the full complexity, or to provide the importance or the relevance of the news itself. There is also this need for comprehensive journalism. So, this calls for a journalistic approach that goes beyond the surface level presentation of events. So, beyond the surface level presentation of events, you have to engage in investigative and analytical reporting to provide a fuller understanding of the news, and that is how you can counter this critique of lazy reporting. This is there are two things to it. One is fake news and the other is plagiarism, and in the coming slides I am going to talk in details about these two things. So, fake news is, as you might have already known, that it's of very many different kinds, where somebody without knowing or without an ill intention or by mistake puts out wrong information. So, that is not that dangerous a thing, but if someone willingly and with a purpose, or to create some kind of trouble, or to create or to achieve certain kinds of ends, he or she puts out information which is not regarded as true, or information which is there to create some kind of a trouble, that information is known as disinformation. So, this is something that journalists have to not only be aware of, but at times even counter aggressively, because unless the right information is put out, the wrong information will keep on repeating and would keep on creating trouble. Then there is the problem of plagiarism as well, and it applies to all kinds of writings, and it is there, and these questions become even more important in the backdrop of the discussion on artificial intelligence, because many of us should know, or many of us do already know, that these large language models like ChatGPT, for example, is based on training the data set through content that already exists. So, that is one kind of constructing sentences, artificial intelligence. But if you actively seek out other people's work and you try to pass it as your own, then you are treading dangerous territory, and that plagiarism can have severe consequences. So, the fake news refers to false or misleading information presented as news. Its proliferation, especially on social media, poses significant challenges to journalistic integrity and public trust. Plagiarism is the act of using someone else's work or ideas without proper attribution, and it undermines the credibility of the journalists and their publications. So, journalists must exercise rigorous fact checking, source verification, and ethical reporting practices to combat these issues of fake news and plagiarism very, very effectively and aggressively. So, the viral nature of misinformation is extremely very important, because at times this element of misinformation or even disinformation utilizes the inherent likes and dislikes of people. So, it uses kind of half truths. So, part of the information is correct, and the other part, the more difficult part or the most dangerous, or the part that might create more trouble, is not true. So, some part of the nature is true, the other part is not true. And if you find something which you already believe in, something that you think is good, or something that you stand for, and if you get that kind of an information, you tend to share it with people you know, or you share it with people you think should know about all these things. So, this misinformation can spread very fast. So, there again journalism has a very important role to not just be aware of the problems of misinformation, but to counter it effectively. And the studies have shown that there is often a direct correlation between the inaccuracy of information and its likelihood to go viral, especially on social media platforms. Now, this is something that is very profound, and this is something that says something about how communication becomes, how a certain kind of communication reaches out to more people in a very short point of time. That if it's inaccurate often, and there have been a number of studies on that, we are not going into all those data here, but if the whatever has become very popular or whatever has become viral, the studies have shown that many of those so-called popular, means reaching out to a lot of people, and viral, that kind of an information is often very inaccurate, or it often falls under the purview of the misinformation and disinformation that we have spoken of. So, reference studies have shown that for example, the BuzzFeed analysis during the 2016 US presidential elections, it showed how misinformation gets more engagement than accurate reporting. So, there is one accurate reporting, it does not get too much viewership, not too many clicks, not too many likes, not too many people are following it. But if it is misinformation, if it is information that is not correct, it gains more engagement. So, the responsibility of journalists is to discern and report the truth, especially in an age where misinformation can spread widely and can spread rapidly. So, that is where as we say that we are fighting against a very new kind of a phenomenon, and we are yet to know about the true nature of how misinformation spreads. But right now all we know is that misinformation spreads faster than accurate news reports in many cases. There are a lot of legal and ethical considerations in news reporting, and there will be other units where we will talk about the legal considerations. For example, one has to be very clear about not violating copyright or looking at information which could be slanderous or libelous or even cause defamation. And it is very, very important for all writers, including news writers, to be extremely careful about the legal considerations. For example, although the Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution of India provides a right to freedom of speech and expression, there are certain limitations on the right to freedom of speech and expression. For example, it is illegal to write something which goes against friendly relations between two nations. So, you are not, it's illegal to write pieces which might create ill will between two friendly nations. the ethical considerations in news reporting, a lot of these things that we have been talking about, they also fall under the purview of ethical considerations. So, we need to recognize the importance of copyright laws in journalism. We need to emphasize the need for reporters to respect intellectual property rights when using external sources such as text and images. Google search, for example, provides all those options where it tells you that these are the images which are free to use, or these are the images which are not free to use. And as the digital media or as the digital ecosystem becomes more important, these things will become even more important. So, we need to recognize the importance of copyright laws in journalism, and we need to respect intellectual property rights. The ethical obligation, including accuracy, this is paramount, because when somebody is consuming journalistic content, he or she is consuming it with the idea that whoever has produced this has done due diligence as far as accuracy is concerned. So, if it is inaccurate, then as a journalist you are not doing what is expected of you as a professional. Fairness, again, that is a very, very important element, and these are not just simple terms, but these are things, or these are live things that a professional journalist lives and swears by. Independence, and that again is a very important part of professional journalistic output, which differentiates journalistic output from the output of people who just put out raw information, for example, who are not professional news producers and just put out information on the social media or the net. They might not be independent, they might have a certain viewpoint, or they might have a certain reason for putting out such kind of propaganda content on the net. But as a professional journalist, one is supposed to be independent and is regarded as independent most of the times. Accountability, a professional journalist output is accountable. As a journalist, you can be sued, or you can be show caused, or you can be asked to kind of explain your output or the content that you have written. So, you are accountable for each and every word that you write, each and every word you speak, each and every word you put out on the radio. So, this accountability is a professional accountability, and it is not just individual accountability, it is the accountability for the organization as well. For example, if something is published in a newspaper, it is not only the reporter who might be sued, often it is the editor or the publisher who is sued as well. So, this obligation for being truthful, for being accurate, for being doing things in a fair manner and independent manner leads to this idea of being accountable in a fair manner. So, if you do not do these things, then you might be putting out a content which might lead you into trouble. So, one needs to emphasize the importance of not plagiarizing and always attributing sources correctly. And as journalists, it is regarded as a very, very good practice when we attribute sources, that he or she shared it, or this belongs to this report, or the National Family Health Service says this. So, this is very, very important, that you attribute sources, and it not just is a good practice, but it's also helps you to establish more credibility, because when you attribute sources, you are adding to the credibility of your news report. So, we must address potential legal issues such as defamation, because defamation can be civil, it can be criminal, and it can lead to severe consequences if a journalist is not aware of the issues related to defamation. The right to privacy, where this line of putting out information in the public domain begins, is something very, very important. So, if it is something which is private and it is not in public interest, then it should not be put out in the public domain, because one very important indicator of journalistic content is that whether whatever you are writing is in public interest or not. If it is in public interest, then it can be a defense against defamation or privacy or other such legal obligations. But understanding the legal framework within which journalists operate is a very, very important thing to remember. what are the consequences of plagiarism? So, we just said that it's the act of using someone else's work or ideas without proper attribution. The consequences of plagiarism includes loss of credibility. People will remember the journalist who has plagiarized somebody else's work, and his future work will be tainted by this kind of an impression about him or her, which will kind of tarnish his future reputation as well. So, it includes this loss of credibility, loss of professional reputation. So, being professional means doing the job to your best possible ability in the best possible manner within the framework of your professional requirements. So, your professional reputation takes massive damage if you are caught plagiarizing somebody else's work. There can be legal action because it falls under the purview of copyright, and of course, it breaches the various ethical codes of journalistic standards of various organizations or even various statutory institutions. So, we have to stress the importance of original reporting and how journalists can avoid plagiarism. So, there are a lot of plagiarism detection tools is there. So, we must mention the use of this plagiarism detection tools, and there are these digital tools available, and some of these tools are pretty very simple. You can just take 32 words at one go and put it on Google, and then the Google will bring out places where it has appeared. So, that's a very important simple tool, the Google tool, which is there for anybody to find out whether one certain piece of the text has been plagiarized or is somebody's own. But there are other sophisticated tools as well, and that is why it calls for rigorous editorial checks, that the editorial department has a very important role to see that no plagiarized content passes through the editorial lens. Now, the print, online and broadcast journalism each have unique demands and styles, and they shape how stories are reported and presented. So, for example, when we talk of ideas, the print journalism is a very good medium to discuss ideas because they focus on an in-depth analysis. They can talk about comprehensive narratives, the storytelling that we spoke of, and it does not have too much of an emphasis on immediate update, because although there are web editions, but still the in-depth coverage is what sets the print journalism apart. So, the online and broadcast journalism, they prioritize speed, they prioritize multimedia elements, and they prioritize interactivity. So, for example, if there is something which is for the online media, the interactive elements are a very important element of multimedia content there. And of course, online journalism prioritizes speed. Broadcast journalism, it cannot have too much of non-visual elements, so it has to emphasize those visual elements. Radio, for example, is also a good medium for ideas, but radio is not very good for numbers, for example. So, if you are dealing with a lot of statistics or if you are dealing with a lot of numbers, then probably television or the online media or even the print is good for that, because radio is good for ideas, and radio is also good to set the imagination free. And that is why very often we say in our classes that radio has pictures. Now, why does radio have pictures? Because it lets us imagine. When I listen to somebody's voice without seeing the face, I am imagining the context, I am imagining the words, I am imagining the background, I am imagining what the person would be looking like, so on and so forth. So, there is a lot to imagine in radio. That is why the podcast and these radio inputs have such an important kind of an audience, because the audience gets to imagine or they gets to see pictures, as we would say. So, this explains why radio is regarded as a very important means of persuasion. But print journalism, or if you are writing for print media, it is important that you realize that it allows you the depth, or people are reading it with a lot of time on their hands, or when they are reading, they are probably just not doing too many other things. So, print journalism is having a separate kind of a characteristic. So, this one needs to adapt your reporting style and writing style to suit the medium, and that's very important. And at times we have to create content or to kind of adapt the same kind of a content for these three inputs. For example, even if you're working for a newspaper, the newspaper has a web edition, so you'll have to write down shorts or you have to write down listicles for that. Or that same newspaper might be having a kind of a audio-visual output, a Facebook, a YouTube channel or those kind of things. So we must be able to write the content for all these three platforms at the same time. So audience expectations vary with each medium, and understanding these expectations is crucial for effective communication. So there are examples in how the same story might be reported differently in a newspaper. So a newspaper will have greater descriptive elements or trying to point out about the significance, about the background, about similar incidents that might have happened. On a television news channel, it is more about the visual elements, it's more about the most important element. It is about the most dramatic element. So the story on a television, or maybe if it's on a television news bulletin, it is hardly there for 90 seconds, the entire story. So within those 90 seconds, you'll have to provide those inputs. On a digital platform, the same story will have more interactive elements, will have more things where you can click and go, or you can listen to this, or you can see this, or you can put in your own comments or those kind of things. So these audience expectations are different for all these different kinds of digital platform. So as journalists, this importance of objectivity, which we have spoken in great details in the earlier video, the importance of ethical reporting is extremely important. And the most important thing is this adapting to different media. If you're writing for print media, your output will be different. If you're writing for television, your writing will be different. If you're writing for the digital media, your writing will be different. So while writing, this importance of objectivity, of ethical reporting is very important. And it's the need for journalists to maintain high standards in the face of evolving challenges is very critical in a democratic society. So media professionals need to commit to these standards, emphasizing continuing learning and adaptation as key to successful journalism. So we come to the end of today's lecture. So just three very simple questions to check your progress. So why do you think fake news exists? Do you think reporting changes according to the medium? And explain the concept of the sound bite. If you have been able to discuss these things, you have followed the 4 parts of the Unit 1 that we have discussed so far in these lectures. I'll be back with another unit in this lecture series on professional news writing in this Master of Arts Journalism and Mass Communication course of the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University, Ahmedabad. Thank you so much.